her for threatening to call the cops on my sister, 32F, after she dumped her kids, 6M, 4F, on me, 28F, for an 8-week vacation without asking? She showed up unannounced, demanded I babysit, and left them at my apartment despite my refusal. When I threatened to report her for abandonment, she sent a sketchy friend to assault me in my home, then swooped in to take the kids back. Now she's acting like I'm the bad guy for escalating things, and my parents are split. Mom says I should have just watched the kids, but Dad thinks she's unhinged. AITA for standing my ground, and should I press charges? I was halfway through a spreadsheet, the kind that makes your eyes glaze over after an hour, when the doorbell rang. It was a Friday evening, the sun dipping low, casting my small apartment in a warm, golden haze that usually felt like a reward after a long work week. My place isn't much, a one-bedroom walk-up in a quiet part of town, with just enough space for me, my laptop, and a finicky houseplant I've somehow kept alive. I'm 28, single, and my life revolves around my marketing job, which demands 50-hour weeks and a fake smile for clients who change their minds every 5 minutes. The doorbell was an intrusion, a rare one. I don't get unannounced visitors. My first thought was a delivery guy with the wrong address, so I shuffled to the door in my sweatpants, expecting to wave someone off. Instead, there was my sister, Claire, standing on the stoop with her 2 kids, Ethan and Lily, clinging to her legs like shipwreck survivors. Claire's 32, but she's always carried herself like she's auditioning for a reality show. Big gestures, loud voice, and a knack for turning every situation into her personal stage. Her hair was swept into a messy bun, and she wore a flowy sundress that screamed I'm headed somewhere fabulous. Behind her, 2 duffel bags slumped on the ground, stuffed to bursting. Ethan, 6, stared at his sneakers, while 4-year-old Lily clutched a stuffed bunny, her eyes wide and uncertain. I blinked, trying to process the scene. Claire, what's going on? She didn't even look at me properly, just waved a hand like she was swatting a fly. I need you to watch the kids for a bit. I'm going on a trip. Her tone was casual, like she was asking me to water her plants, not take custody of 2 human beings. I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but her expression didn't crack. She was serious. My stomach twisted. A trip? For how long? I asked, leaning against the doorframe, hoping this was some fleeting whim. 8 weeks, she said, checking her phone. Maybe 9. It's a wellness retreat in Bali. I booked it last week. Life-changing stuff, you know? She finally glanced up, her eyes daring me to argue. 8 weeks. 2 months. My brain short-circuited. I'm not a kid person. I don't have a spare room or a fridge stocked with chicken nuggets. My apartment's barely big enough for me, let alone 2 kids who probably need, I don't know, bedtime stories and vegetables. I could feel my pulse in my temples. Claire, you can't just, 8 weeks. I have a job. I can't take care of Ethan and Lily for 2 months. She rolled her eyes, already turning back toward her car, a beat-up sedan parked crookedly across 2 spaces. Oh, come on, Sarah. Family helps family. You're their aunt. It's not like I'm asking you to adopt them. She said it with that infuriating smirk, the one she's been using since we were kids to get out of trouble. Ethan tugged at her sleeve, mumbling something about his iPad, but she shushed him without looking. Lily just stood there, bunny dangling, staring at me like I was supposed to have answers. I didn't. I was still trying to wrap my head around the fact that my sister thought she could dump her kids on me without so much as a phone call. Claire, wait, I said, stepping onto the stoop, my voice sharper than I meant. You didn't even ask me. I can't just drop everything. I have deadlines, meetings, I'm not set up for this. I gestured at my apartment behind me, where a half-eaten bowl of ramen sat on the coffee table, my laptop still glowing with spreadsheets. Claire stopped, one hand on her car door, and gave me that look, the one that says I'm being dramatic, unreasonable, selfish. It's a look I've seen 100 times, ever since we were kids and she'd borrow my favorite toys, only to lose them or break them and act like it was my fault for caring. Sarah, you're making this a bigger deal than it is, she said, her voice dripping with exasperation. They're good kids. Just feed them, put on some cartoons, and they'll be fine. I need this trip, okay? I've been through a lot. She didn't elaborate, but that was Claire's way, vague references to her struggles that somehow justified every reckless decision. Divorced 2 years ago, she'd been spiraling ever since, chasing one impulsive plan after another. Juice cleanses, pyramid schemes, now this Bali retreat. I'd bailed her out before, loaned her money, let her crash on my couch, but this was different. This was her kids, her responsibilities, not mine. I glanced at Ethan and Lily, who were now poking at the duffel bags, oblivious to the argument brewing above them. Ethan's sneakers were untied, and Lily's bunny was missing an eye, giving it a lopsided stare that matched my growing unease. Claire, this isn't fair, I said, lowering my voice so the kids wouldn't hear. You can't just decide I'm their babysitter for 2 months. I need to talk to you about this properly. Can you at least come inside? She sighed, loud and theatrical, like I was the one inconveniencing her. I don't have time, Sarah. My flight's tomorrow, and I still need to pack. She opened her car door, already halfway in. Just, figure it out. You're good at that. I'll call you when I land. Before I could respond, she was in the driver's seat, engine rumbling. I stood there, frozen, as she peeled out, tires screeching against the asphalt. The kids looked up, startled, and Ethan's face crumpled. "Mommy's coming back, right?" he asked, his voice small. I didn't know what to say. I crouched down, forcing a smile. "Yeah, buddy, she's just going on a trip. Come on, let's get your stuff inside." I grabbed the duffel bags, which were heavier than they looked, and ushered the kids into my apartment. The door clicked shut behind us, and the reality hit like a freight train. I was now responsible for 2 kids I barely knew how to handle, with no plan, no warning, and a sister who thought family meant do whatever I want. My living room, usually a sanctuary of quiet evenings with takeout and Netflix, felt suddenly claustrophobic, the kids' presence filling every corner. Ethan plopped onto the couch, already digging through his bag for his iPad, while Lily clutched her bunny and stared at me, waiting for instructions I didn't have. I sank into a chair, my mind racing. Claire and I had never been close, not really. Growing up, she was the golden child, charming, bold, always the center of attention. I was the quiet one, the planner, the one who cleaned up her messes. When she got pregnant with Ethan at 26, I was the one who drove her to doctor's appointments when her ex flaked. When she needed rent money last year, I Venmo'd her my savings, even though it meant skipping my own vacation. But this was too much. I couldn't append my life for 2 months, not with a big project deadline looming at work and a boss who already thought I was distracted. Yet the guilt gnawed at me. Ethan and Lily weren't to blame. They were just kids, caught in their mom's whirlwind. I tried calling Claire, hoping to catch her before she got too far, but it went straight to voicemail. "Claire, this is insane," I said, my voice shaking. "You can't just leave them here. Call me back. Now." I hung up, staring at my phone, willing it to ring. It didn't. The kids were watching me now, Ethan's iPad forgotten, Lily's bunny squeezed tighter. "Aunt Sarah, are we staying here?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I forced another smile, my chest tight. "Just for a little bit, okay? Let's get you some dinner." I rummaged through my kitchen, finding nothing kid-friendly except a box of cereal and some questionable milk. As I poured bowls for them, my mind spun. How was I supposed to manage this? Work, groceries, school drop-offs, if they even went to school right now? I didn't know their routines, their allergies, their bedtime. Claire hadn't left a note, a schedule, nothing. Just 2 duffel bags and a vague promise to call when I land. I sat across from the kids, watching them eat, their small spoons clinking against my mismatched bowls. Outside, the street lights flickered on, and my apartment felt smaller than ever. I was angry, scared, and stuck, with no idea how to navigate the next 8 weeks, or even the next 8 hours. All I knew was that Claire had crossed a line, and I wasn't sure how to pull her back. The cereal bowls sat empty on my coffee table, their sugary remnants crusting over as Ethan and Lily sprawled on my couch, engrossed in some cartoon I'd found on my laptop. The flickering screen cast shadows across my cramped living room, where the kids' duffel bags still slumped against the wall like uninvited guests. It was past 8 p.m., and the weight of Claire's stunt was sinking in. My apartment, once a haven of predictable quiet, felt like a pressure cooker. Ethan, 6, was glued to the cartoon, his face blank, while 4-year-old Lily clutched her one-eyed bunny, occasionally glancing at me as if I might vanish like her mom. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, phone in hand, staring at Claire's contact name. I'd called her twice already, straight to voicemail both times. My last message, sharp, pleading, hadn't gotten a response. My thumb hovered over the call button again, my stomach churning with a mix of anger and dread. I couldn't do this. Not for 8 weeks. Not even for a night. I hit call. It rang once, twice, then Claire's voice, bright and fake like she was answering a telemarketer. "Sarah, I'm kind of in the middle of something," she said before I could speak. I could hear background noise, music, laughter, maybe a bar. She was already celebrating her escape. I gripped the phone tighter, my voice low to keep the kids from hearing. "Claire, you need to come back. Now. You can't just leave Ethan and Lily here and expect me to deal with it." She sighed, that long, dramatic huff she'd perfected by high school. "Oh my God, Sarah, you're acting like I abandoned them in a ditch. They're with you. They aren't. They're fine." Her words were sharp, dismissive, like I was the one being unreasonable. I stood up, pacing the 3 steps my kitchen allowed, my bare feet cold against the linoleum. "Fine. Claire, I have a job. I have a life. I don't have space or time for 2 kids for 2 months. You didn't even ask." "You're overreacting," she snapped, her voice cutting through the phone like a blade. "It's not like I'm gone forever. Just chill, okay? They're easy. Feed them, put them to bed, done. I'll be back before you know it." I could picture her, rolling her eyes, probably sipping a cocktail while I was stuck playing Emergency Mom. The cartoon's tinny music filled the silence between us, and I glanced at the kids. Lily was sucking her thumb, her bunny pressed against her cheek. Ethan's eyes were still on the screen, but his shoulders were hunched, like he was bracing for something. "Claire, I'm serious," I said, my voice shaking. "I can't do this. You need to come get them by tomorrow, or I'm calling the police. This is abandonment." The word felt heavy, final, like dropping a stone into a still pond. I didn't even know if it was the right term, but it was the only leverage I had. There was a pause, a long one, and for a second I thought she might actually listen. Then she laughed, short and bitter. "The police? Really, Sarah? You're going to call the cops on your own sister? Wow. Classy. Before I could respond, the line went dead. She'd hung up. I stared at my phone, my pulse hammering in my ears. The apartment felt smaller, the walls closing in as the cartoon's laugh track mocked me. I sank back into the chair, my mind racing. Abandonment. Was that what this was? I grabbed my laptop, shoving it next to the kids' empty bowls, and started Googling. Child abandonment laws brought up a wall of legal jargon, but the gist was clear: leaving kids without a plan or consent could be a crime. My heart sank as I read: fines, jail time, CPS involvement. I didn't want to get Claire arrested, not really. She was my sister, even if she drove me up the wall. But what choice did she leave me? I couldn't just rearrange my life to play mom for 2 months. The kids' voices pulled me back. "Aunt Sarah, I'm hungry," Lily said, her voice small, her bunny dangling by one ear. Ethan looked up, nodding. "Mom usually makes mac and cheese," he said, matter-of-fact, like I should know their routine. I forced a smile, my chest tight. "Okay, let me see what I've got." My kitchen was a disaster. Half a loaf of bread, some questionable yogurt, and a jar of pickles. No mac and cheese. I ordered a pizza, fumbling with the app while trying to keep my voice cheerful. "Pizza's coming, guys. Fun, right?" They didn't answer, just went back to the cartoon, but their silence felt heavier than any words. As I waited for the delivery, my mind drifted to the last time Claire pulled something like this. 3 years ago, she'd shown up at my old place, crying about her divorce, begging to stay for just a week. A week turned into a month, with her borrowing my clothes, eating my food, and leaving dishes everywhere. I'd been patient then, too patient, cleaning up her messes while she partied with friends. When I finally asked her to leave, she'd called me heartless, said I didn't understand her pain. Mom took her side, as always, saying I should be more supportive. Dad just shrugged, like he always did. That was Claire, charming enough to get away with anything, leaving me to pick up the pieces. The pizza arrived, and I set it up on the coffee table, letting the kids eat straight from the box. They perked up a bit, grease on their fingers, but Ethan kept glancing at the door, like he expected Claire to walk in. "When's Mommy coming back?" he asked, his voice so quiet I almost missed it. I froze, a slice halfway to my mouth. "Soon, buddy," I lied, hating how easily the words came. "She's just on a trip." Lily nodded, accepting it, but Ethan's eyes narrowed, like he knew I was dodging. I changed the subject, asking about their favorite cartoons, but my mind was elsewhere. What if Claire didn't come back tomorrow? What if she really meant to leave them here for 8 weeks? Bedtime was a mess. I had no spare beds, so I made a nest of blankets on the couch for them. Ethan complained it was lumpy, and Lily wouldn't sleep without a nightlight I didn't have. I left my desk lamp on, dimmed, and sat on the floor next to them, scrolling through my phone as they drifted off. My work email was piling up. My boss had already sent a passive-aggressive note about a delayed report. I couldn't focus on it. All I could think about was Claire's laugh, that sharp, mocking sound when I mentioned the police. She didn't think I'd do it. Maybe she was right. Calling the cops felt extreme, like burning a bridge I couldn't rebuild. But what else could I do? I couldn't afford childcare, and my apartment wasn't a home for kids. My life wasn't built for this. I opened my notes app and started typing a plan. Step 1. Call Claire again in the morning. Step 2. Try Mom and Dad, see if they'd take the kids. Step 3. I hesitated, then typed it. Look up CPS. My finger hovered over the save button, guilt twisting in my gut. Claire was reckless, sure, but she loved her kids, in her own messy way. Reporting her could tear the kids' world apart. But letting her walk all over me wasn't an option either. I glanced at Ethan and Lily, their small forms curled under my mismatched blankets, the lamp casting soft light on their faces. They didn't deserve this, being pawns in their mom's latest adventure. I didn't deserve it either. By midnight, I was still awake, the pizza box greasy and crumpled on the table, the cartoon long over. My phone sat silent, no word from Claire. I replayed our call, her casual dismissal, her accusation that I was overreacting. Maybe I was. Maybe I should just suck it up, figure out how to make it work. But the thought of 8 weeks, 2 months of missed deadlines, sleepless nights, and Claire's smug assumption that I'd cave, made my blood boil. I wasn't her doormat. Not this time. I typed one last text to her: "You have until noon tomorrow to get them, or I'm calling the police." I mean it. I hit send, my hands trembling. The message delivered, but no reply came. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the weight of my ultimatum settling over me like a storm cloud. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. The morning light filtered through my apartment's thin curtains, doing little to brighten the chaos that had taken over my living room. Ethan and Lily were awake by 7 a.m., their voices piercing the quiet I usually savored with my coffee. Ethan, 6 and serious, was sprawled on the floor, surrounded by a fortress of couch cushions he'd torn apart, muttering about building a spaceship. Lily, 4 and impossibly clingy, trailed me from the kitchen to the couch, her one-eyed bunny dragging behind her, asking for pancakes I didn't have. My phone sat silent on the counter, no response from Claire to my ultimatum from last night. Noon or the police. It was 8:15 now, and the deadline loomed like a guillotine. My apartment, once a tidy refuge for my work-from-home days, was a mess, cereal crumbs on the carpet, pizza box still on the coffee table, and a pile of unfolded blankets where the kids had slept. I was 28, single, and drowning in a role I never signed up for, my resentment toward Claire growing with every sticky fingerprint on my furniture. I tried to start my day like normal, firing up my laptop for a work call while the kids ate more cereal, my only kid-friendly food. My marketing job demanded focus, and today was a big client meeting via Zoom. I set Ethan and Lily up with my tablet, praying a cartoon would keep them quiet. Stay here, okay? Aunt Sarah's got to work, I said, forcing a smile. Ethan nodded, barely looking up, his dark eyes fixed on the screen. He was a quiet kid, almost too quiet, like he was holding his breath for his mom to come back. Lily, though, kept scooting closer, her bunny pressed against my leg. Can you sit with me? She asked, her voice small. I patted her head, my stomach twisting. In a bit, sweetie. I've got a call. I felt like a jerk, brushing her off, but I couldn't afford to bomb this meeting. The call was a disaster. My boss, Karen, was mid-sentence about the client's new campaign when Ethan decided his spaceship needed sound effects. Loud ones. Pew! Pew! He shouted, crashing cushions together. Lily giggled, then started mimicking him, her bunny flopping wildly. I muted my mic, hissing, guys, please, quiet, but it was too late. Karen's voice cut through. Sarah, is everything okay? You seem distracted. I unmuted, fumbling an excuse about construction noise, my face burning. The client, a stuffy exec, raised an eyebrow on the screen, and I knew I'd hear about this later. By the time the call ended, I was sweating, my inbox already pinging with Karen's follow-up. Let's discuss your focus tomorrow. Great. Just what I needed. The kids were oblivious, now arguing over the tablet. Ethan wanted a superhero show. Lily wanted ponies. I snatched the tablet, setting it to a neutral cartoon, and tried to breathe. My apartment felt like it was shrinking, the walls pressing in with every shout, every spilled crumb. I checked my phone, 10:30 a.m., still no word from Claire. I texted her again, you've got 90 minutes. I'm not kidding. No reply. My anger flared, hot and sharp. How could she do this? Not just to me, but to Ethan and Lily, who kept asking, where's mommy? In voices that broke my heart. I wanted to scream, to drive to wherever Claire was and drag her back, but I was stuck here, playing babysitter in a life that wasn't built for it. Lunch was another ordeal. I ordered takeout, burgers this time, because my fridge was a wasteland. While we waited, I tried to tidy up, but Ethan had spilled juice on the carpet, and Lily was drawing on my coffee table with a crayon she'd found God knows where. Lily, no. I snapped, louder than I meant. Her lip trembled, and she hugged her bunny, eyes welling up. Guilt hit me like a punch. I'm sorry, sweetie, I said, kneeling beside her. Let's draw on paper, okay? She nodded, sniffing, and I found some printer paper, my hands shaking. Ethan watched from his cushioned fort, his expression unreadable. Mom lets us draw anywhere, he said, not accusing, just stating a fact. I forced a smile. Well, Aunt Sarah's place has different rules. Rules I was making up on the fly. The doorbell rang, and I jumped, hoping it was Claire coming to her senses. Instead, it was Mrs. Delgado, my nosy neighbor from across the hall. She was in her 60s, always peering out her peephole, and now she stood there with a plate of cookies and a curious frown. Sarah, I heard a lot of noise, she said, peering past me at the kids. Everything okay? I didn't know you had little ones visiting. Her tone was polite but probing, the kind that made you feel judged. I took the cookies, mumbling something about my sister's kids staying for a bit. Oh, how nice, she said, but her eyes lingered on the mess behind me. Cushions, crumbs, chaos. I closed the door quickly, my face hot. Even Mrs. Delgado was judging my crash course in parenting. The burgers arrived, and I sat the kids at my tiny table, trying to make it fun. Picnic time, I said, spreading a blanket on the floor when Lily complained about the chairs being too high. Ethan ate silently, picking at his fries, while Lily chatted about her bunny's imaginary adventures. For a moment, it was almost nice, their small faces lit by the afternoon sun. I caught myself smiling when Lily giggled, ketchup on her nose. But then Ethan looked up, his voice quiet. Is Mom mad at us? My heart sank. I wanted to hug him, to promise everything would be okay, but I didn't know if it would. No, buddy, I said softly. She's just busy. She loves you. The lie tasted bitter, but what else could I say? I called my best friend, Jess, while the kids napped, more out of exhaustion than routine. Jess answered on the second ring, her voice a lifeline. Sarah, what the hell? Claire did what? I spilled everything, the drop-off, the ultimatum, the silence. Jess was furious, ranting about Claire's selfishness, but when I mentioned the police, she hesitated. That's heavy, Sarah. Like, CPS could get involved. Are you sure? Her words echoed my own fears. Claire was a mess, but she was their mom. What if I made things worse for the kids? Jess suggested calling my parents, but I dreaded that. Mom would tell me to be a team player, like always. Dad would just sigh and change the subject. Still, I promised to try, hanging up with no clearer plan. By evening, the apartment was a war zone. Lily had spilled water on the couch, Ethan had knocked over my lamp, and my work emails were piling up, unanswered. I was trying to set up a bedtime routine, brushing teeth, finding pajamas in their duffel bags, when my phone buzzed. A text from Claire, finally. My heart leapt, then sank as I read it. You're being so dramatic. I'll deal with this when I'm back. Chill. No apology, no timeline, just her usual deflection. Worse, it felt off. Cold, almost threatening. I stared at the words, my hands clammy. Was she really this callous, or was something else coming? I tucked the kids in, Ethan clutching his iPad, Lily her bunny, and sat on the floor, my back against the couch. Noon had come and gone. Claire hadn't shown. The police threat hung over me, real now, not just a bluff. But as I looked at the kids, sleeping fitfully in my makeshift nest, I felt trapped. I was angry at Claire, furious, but the kids weren't the problem. They were sweet, messy, and scared, and I was all they had right now. My apartment, my orderly little life, was unraveling, and I didn't know how to stop it, or if I even should. 2 days had passed since Claire's car screeched out of my life, leaving Ethan and Lily in my care like an unwanted package. My apartment, once a sanctuary of solitude, was now a battlefield of scattered toys, sticky juice stains, and the constant hum of cartoons I'd looped to keep the kids occupied. It was Sunday night, and the silence from Claire was deafening. My ultimatum, noon on Saturday or I'd call the police, had come and gone, her only response a cryptic text telling me to chill. My phone lay on the kitchen counter, its blank screen mocking me as I paced the 3 steps between my fridge and sink. Ethan, 6, was asleep on the couch, his lanky frame curled under a blanket, while Lily, 4, clutched her one-eyed bunny beside him, her soft snores barely audible. I was 28, single and unraveling, my marketing job teetering on the edge of disaster and my patience worn to a thread. I couldn't keep this up, but the thought of what came next, calling child services, involving the law, made my stomach churn. I needed help, so I did what I'd been dreading, I called my parents. I started with Mom, knowing she'd pick up even at 9 p.m. Her voice was warm, familiar, the kind that used to soothe me when I scraped my knees as a kid. Sarah, honey, what's wrong? She asked, sensing my tension. I spilled everything, Claire's drop-off, the 8-week vacation, my threat to call the police, her silence. I expected outrage, maybe a plan, but Mom sighed, long and heavy, like I was the one causing trouble. Sarah, she's your sister. Family steps up. You can't just throw her kids to the wolves over a little trip. A little trip. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. Mom, it's 2 months. I have a job, a life. I didn't sign up for this. She clucked her tongue, that old sound of disapproval. Claire's going through a lot. You know how hard her divorce was. Can't you manage for a bit? For Ethan and Lily. Her words stung, echoing years of the same pattern. Claire's messes were everyone else's responsibility, and I was selfish for objecting. I remembered being 16, cleaning up Claire's spilled nail polish while Mom praised her for living boldly. I ended the call quickly, promising to think about it, my throat tight with frustration. Dad was next, though I knew better than to expect action. He answered gruffly, half distracted by the TV blaring in the background. When I explained, he snorted. Claire's always been a flake. Irresponsible, that one. His voice carried the weight of years watching his eldest daughter stumble from one crisis to another. But when I asked if he could take the kids, he hesitated. Sarah, I'm retired. Your mom and I aren't set up for that. Besides, Claire'll come around. He offered nothing else, no solutions, no offer to call her himself. I hung up, staring at the ceiling, the familiar sting of their passivity settling in. Mom enabled Claire, Dad avoided her. And me. I was the fixer, the one left holding the bag. Always had been. I sank onto a kitchen chair, my laptop open to a tab I'd been avoiding, a government website on child protective services. The words abandonment and neglect stared back, cold and clinical. If I called, they'd investigate Claire, maybe take Ethan and Lily into foster care. The thought made my chest ache. I pictured Lily's wide eyes, Ethan's quiet frown, their duffel bags packed with clothes that smelled of their home. They didn't deserve to be uprooted again, not after their mom had already ditched them. But what was my alternative? My job was on thin ice. Karen had emailed again, questioning my commitment after Friday's botched meeting. My apartment was a 1-bedroom, barely 600 square feet, with no space for 2 kids and their endless energy. I couldn't afford daycare, not on my salary. I closed the tab, my hands trembling. Calling CPS felt like betraying the kids, betraying Claire, betraying the family Mom always said we had to protect. But letting Claire walk all over me wasn't an option either. The kids stirred, pulling me from my spiral. Lily sat up, rubbing her eyes, her bunny dangling from one hand. Aunt Sarah, where's Mommy? She asked, her voice thick with sleep. It was the 3rd time she'd asked today, each time like a knife. I knelt beside her, brushing her messy hair back. She's on her trip, sweetie. She'll be back soon. The lie tasted sour, but the truth, that I had no idea where Claire was or when she'd return, was worse. Ethan opened his eyes, watching us from his side of the couch. She didn't call today, he said, his voice flat, like he was stating the weather. I forced a smile. Not yet, buddy. Let's get you back to sleep. I tucked them in, my heart heavy. They were so small, so trusting, and I was failing them, caught between my anger at Claire and my guilt for not being enough. I couldn't sleep, so I sat on the floor by the couch, scrolling through my phone, rereading Claire's last text. You're being so dramatic. I'll deal with this when I'm back. Chill. Its coldness gnawed at me. I tried calling her again. Voicemail. I texted, Claire, this isn't a game. Answer me. Nothing. The clock ticked past 11 p.m., the city outside my window quiet except for the occasional car. I thought about Claire at 20, when she got pregnant with Ethan and moved in with her ex. I'd helped her pack, driven her to appointments, even when she forgot to say thank you. She'd always been reckless, but this, dumping her kids and vanishing, was a new low. What was she doing in Bali? Meditating? Partying? Did she even care? My phone buzzed, startling me. A text from an unknown number. Mind your own business, or you'll regret it. My breath caught. The words were vague, but the threat was clear, chilling in its anonymity. Was it Claire, using a burner phone? One of her sketchy friends? She'd always run with a rough crowd, guys who looked like they'd sell you a stolen car and call it a favor. I stared at the message, my pulse racing, the apartment suddenly too dark, too quiet. I checked the locks, my hand shaky, then peeked at the kids, still asleep, oblivious to the storm brewing. The text felt like a warning shot, a hint of something worse to come. I wanted to call Jess, but it was too late, and what would I say? That I was scared of a text I couldn't prove was from Claire. I lay on my bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling, the text replaying in my mind. Sleep wouldn't come. I kept seeing Mom's face, her disappointment if I called CPS, her voice saying, family sticks together. I saw Dad, shrugging, letting Claire slide again. And Claire herself, laughing off my ultimatum, her smirk as sharp as ever. But mostly, I saw Ethan and Lily, their small hands reaching for a mom who wasn't there. I hated Claire for putting me in this position, for making me the bad guy if I acted or the doormat if I didn't. The thought of being the villain in my family's story, Claire's sob story about her heartless sister, made my skin crawl. I'd spent my life avoiding conflict, smoothing things over, but this was different. This was my life, my boundaries, and Claire had trampled them without a second thought. By 2 a.m., I was back at my laptop, the CPS tab open again. I read about temporary guardianship and reporting neglect, each word a step toward a decision I wasn't ready to make. I imagined social workers at my door, Ethan and Lily whisked away, their faces confused and scared. I imagined Claire's rage, her accusations, the family rift that might never heal. But I also imagined 8 weeks of this. Missed work, no sleep, and Claire waltzing back like nothing happened. The threatening text blinked in my mind, a shadow I couldn't shake. I closed the laptop, my head throbbing. Tomorrow, I'd try Claire one more time. If she didn't answer, I'd have to decide. Protect myself or protect the kids' world, even if it meant losing mine. The apartment was silent now, but the weight of that choice pressed down, heavier than ever. The morning of the third day dawned grey and heavy, the sky outside my apartment window mirroring the dread that had settled in my chest. Ethan and Lily were sprawled across my couch, their makeshift bed a tangle of blankets and crumbs from another round of takeout. I hadn't slept, haunted by the threatening text from an unknown number last night. Mind your own business, or you'll regret it. Claire still hadn't responded to my calls or texts, her silence a wall I couldn't breach. My ultimatum, pick up the kids or I'd call the police, felt hollow now, overshadowed by the vague menace of that message. I was 28, single, and drowning in a situation I didn't ask for, my marketing job hanging by a thread and my apartment a chaotic reminder of how ill-equipped I was to play mom. Ethan, 6, was coloring quietly, his focus intense, while Lily, 4, clutched her one-eyed bunny, humming to herself. I was trying to muster the energy to make breakfast, cereal again, when the doorbell rang, sharp and jarring. I froze, my heart lurching. Claire. I hoped, but doubted it. She'd never been one for dramatic returns. I checked my phone, no messages. The bell rang again, insistent. Coming. I called, smoothing my sweatshirt, my bare feet cold against the linoleum as I crossed to the door. I peered through the peephole, expecting Mrs. Delgado with more cookies or complaints about noise. Instead, a man stood there, mid-30s, in a nondescript jacket and cap, holding a clipboard. Delivery guy, I thought, relaxing slightly. Who is it? I asked through the door. Delivery for Sarah, he said, his voice flat, almost rehearsed. I hesitated. I hadn't ordered anything, but with my life in disarray, maybe I'd forgotten something. I opened the door a crack, keeping the chain on. What is it? I asked. He glanced at the clipboard, then at me, his eyes hard, unblinking. Package. Need you to sign. Something felt off, his posture too rigid, his gaze too sharp, but before I could close the door, he shoved it hard, the chain snapping like cheap plastic. I stumbled back, my breath catching as he forced his way in. He was taller than me, broad-shouldered, with a face that might have been forgettable if it weren't for the cold intensity in his eyes. His jacket smelled faintly of cigarette smoke, and his boots left muddy streaks on my floor. Hey, what the hell? I shouted, my voice high with panic. I backed toward the living room, my hands up, trying to keep him at a distance. Ethan and Lily looked up from the couch, their eyes wide. Aunt Sarah. Lily squeaked, clutching her bunny. Kids, stay there. I snapped, my heart hammering as I positioned myself between them and the man. He didn't speak, just advanced, his movements deliberate. You need to back off, he said, low and menacing. Stay out of it. I didn't know what he meant. Claire. The kids. My threat to call the police. Before I could respond, he grabbed my arm, his grip like a vice, and shoved me against the wall. Pain shot through my shoulder as it hit, my head smacking the drywall with a dull thud. I gasped, struggling, but he was stronger, pinning me with one hand while the other swung, a quick, brutal hit to my side. It wasn't a punch to knock me out, just enough to hurt, to warn. I crumpled, gasping, my ribs throbbing. Lily screamed, a high, piercing sound that cut through the fog of pain. Ethan scrambled off the couch, pulling her behind it, his small face pale but fierce. "Leave her alone," he yelled, his voice cracking. The man barely glanced at them, his focus on me. "You don't listen, you get worse," he said, his voice calm, like he was discussing the weather. He released me, stepping back, and I slid to the floor, clutching my side. My vision blurred, not from tears but from the sheer shock of it. Someone had invaded my home, my space, and hurt me. He turned, his boots heavy on the floor, and walked out, leaving the door swinging open. "Stay out of it," he repeated. Then he was gone. I sat there, panting, the pain in my ribs sharp with every breath. Lily was crying now, huddled behind the couch with Ethan, who was whispering to her, trying to calm her. I crawled over, my hands shaking, and pulled them into a hug. "It's okay, you're okay," I said, my voice unsteady. Lily buried her face in my shoulder, her bunny pressed between us, while Ethan clung to my arm, his eyes darting to the door. "Who was that?" he whispered. I didn't know. I didn't want to know. But the text from last night burned in my mind. Claire's doing, or someone she'd sent. My sister, who'd left her kids with me without a second thought, had escalated this to violence. I staggered to my feet, locking the door, my hands fumbling with the deadbolt. My side ached, and my arm was already bruising where he'd grabbed me. I checked the kids, unhurt, thank God, but shaken. Lily's tears soaked my sweatshirt, and Ethan's silence was worse, his eyes too old for a 6-year-old. I wanted to fall apart, to scream, but I couldn't, not with them watching. I grabbed my phone, my fingers clumsy as I dialed 911. "Someone broke in," I told the operator, my voice cracking. He attacked me. I need help." The police arrived within 20 minutes, 2 officers in crisp uniforms who filled my tiny apartment with an air of authority. The older one, a woman with a tight bun, took my statement while her partner, a younger guy, looked around, noting the muddy boot prints. I explained everything: Claire's drop-off, my ultimatum, the threatening text, the man. It sounded insane, like a bad movie, and the officers' faces showed it. "So, you don't know who he was?" the woman asked, her pen pausing. "No ID, no name." I shook my head, my cheeks burning. "He said stay out of over it," I said. "I think he was sent by my sister." Her eyebrow lifted, skeptical. "Your sister?" I nodded, showing them the text, but it wasn't enough. No license plate, no clear description beyond guy in a jacket. They took notes, promised to follow up, but their tone said they didn't expect to find him. They left me with a card and a vague call if you remember anything else. I sat on the couch, the kids beside me, Lily still sniffing, Ethan holding her hand. My ribs throbbed, my arm a mottled purple, and my mind was a storm of fear, rage, and guilt. I'd brought this on myself, hadn't I? Threatening Claire with the police had pushed her to this, sending some thug to scare me, to hurt me in my own home. But the guilt was drowned by anger. She'd left her kids, ignored my pleas, and now this. I looked at Ethan and Lily, their small forms curled against me, and my heart broke. They'd seen it, heard it, felt the terror of a stranger in our space. I tried to shield them, but I'd failed. The pain in my body was nothing compared to the weight of that failure. I hugged them tighter, whispering, "You're safe now," even as my own fear lingered, sharp as the bruises blooming under my skin. The afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across my apartment, which still bore the scars of the morning's violence. Muddy boot prints smeared the floor, my broken door chain dangled uselessly, and a faint ache pulsed in my ribs where the stranger had struck me hours ago. Ethan and Lily were huddled on the couch, quieter than usual, their eyes darting to the door every time a car passed outside. I tried to distract them with cartoons, but the air was thick with unease, the memory of the man's cold threat, "Stay out of it," lingering like a bad smell. I sat at my kitchen table, my phone clutched in one hand, the police officer's card in the other, my arm bruised purple from the assault. I was 28, single, and unraveling, my orderly life shattered by Claire's recklessness and the thug she'd sent to my door. The kids, 6 and 4, were my only anchor, their small presence keeping me from falling apart completely. I was debating whether to call the police again, to push for answers, when the doorbell rang, sharp and sudden. My heart leapt into my throat. I stood, my ribs protesting, and checked the peephole, half expecting another stranger. Instead, it was Claire, her blonde hair swept into a messy bun, her face flushed with that impatient energy she always carried. She wore a sundress and sunglasses perched on her head, like she'd just stepped off a beach instead of abandoning her kids for 3 days. Relief and rage collided in my chest. I opened the door, my hands trembling. "Claire," I said, my voice low, barely controlled. "Where the hell have you been?" She breezed past me, ignoring the question, her eyes scanning the apartment. "Ethan, Lily, let's go," she called, clapping her hands like she was herding pets. The kids looked up, startled. Lily clutched her one-eyed bunny tighter, her face lighting up, while Ethan's expression stayed guarded, his crayon paused mid-scribble. I stepped in front of Claire, blocking her path to the living room. No way, I said, my voice shaking with fury. You don't get to just waltz in here after everything. What is wrong with you? Claire stopped, her lips curling into that familiar smirk, the one that had always gotten her out of trouble. Oh, Sarah, relax, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. You're acting like I committed a crime. I had to sort some things out, okay? I'm here now. She gestured at the kids' duffel bags, still slumped against the wall, as if their presence justified her absence. My ribs throbbed, a reminder of the man she'd sent, or I was sure she'd sent. I pointed to my bruised arm, the purple mark stark against my skin. Sort things out. You sent someone to attack me, Claire. In my own home, with your kids here. Her eyes flicked to my arm, and for a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt. But then she rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. Don't be so dramatic. I didn't send anyone. You probably pissed off some neighbor or something. And honestly, Sarah, you forced my hand. Threatening to call the cops. On me. Your sister. Her voice rose, laced with indignation, as if I were the one who'd crossed a line. I stared at her, stunned, the air sucked out of the room. She was gaslighting me, rewriting the story to make me the villain. It was classic Claire, dodging blame, turning the tables, leaving me questioning my own reality. Forced your hand. I snapped, stepping closer, my voice low so the kids wouldn't hear. You dumped Ethan and Lily here without asking, Claire. 3 days ago, with no warning, no plan, just deal with it. I have a job, a life. You can't just. I stopped, my throat tight, as Lily's small voice cut through. Mommy. She scrambled off the couch, running to Claire, her bunny dragging on the floor. Claire knelt, scooping her up with a theatrical hug, her face softening into a performance of motherhood. Hey, baby girl, she cooed, kissing Lily's forehead. Ethan stayed on the couch, his eyes flicking between us, wary and quiet. My heart sank. They loved her, needed her, and here I was, yelling at their mom. I took a breath, trying to steady myself. Claire, we need to talk about this. That guy, he hurt me, scared the kids. You can't pretend this didn't happen. I gestured at the boot prints, the broken chain, the chaos of my apartment mirroring the mess in my head. Claire set Lily down, her expression hardening. Sarah, I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you should have just watched them instead of making threats. Ever think of that? She grabbed the duffel bags, slinging them over her shoulder. Come on, Ethan, let's go. Ethan slid off the couch, slow and reluctant, his eyes meeting mine for a moment. Aunt Sarah, he said, his voice small. Are you okay? The question hit like a punch, his concern so raw it cracked something in me. I knelt, forcing a smile despite the pain in my ribs. I'm fine, buddy. You take care of Lily, okay? He nodded, but his hand lingered on mine, small and warm, before he followed Claire. Lily clung to her mom's leg, oblivious to the tension, her bunny swinging. I wanted to scream, to grab them and keep them here, safe from whatever Claire was dragging them to next. But they weren't mine. They were hers, and she was taking them back. Claire, wait, I said, my voice breaking. You can't just leave like this. We need to talk, about the kids, about what happened. She turned, her eyes cold, her voice sharp. What's there to talk about? You made it clear you didn't want them here. I'm fixing it. You're welcome. She opened the door, the kids trailing her, and I followed, desperate. This isn't over, I said. You sent someone to hurt me. I'm not letting that go. She laughed, short and bitter, already halfway down the stoop. Good luck proving that, Sarah. Call me when you calm down. She buckled the kids into her car, their small faces peering out the window, and drove off, the engine's roar fading into the dusk. I stood on the stoop, the air cool against my flushed skin, my apartment silent behind me. The living room was a wreck, crayons scattered, blankets crumpled, the ghost of the morning's violence in every corner. I sank onto the couch, my ribs aching, my arm throbbing, and buried my face in my hands. Claire's words echoed. You forced my hand. Was she right? Had my threat to call the police pushed her to this? I replayed the last 3 days, the drop-off, the ultimatum, the text, the assault. I'd been trying to protect myself, my life, but maybe I'd escalated too fast, made it worse. The kids' faces, Ethan's quiet concern, Lily's clingy trust, haunted me. They'd seen me hurt, seen their mom sweep in like nothing happened. What kind of damage had I done, dragging them into this? I grabbed my phone, scrolling through my texts to Claire, the threatening one from the unknown number. I wanted to call the police again, to demand they track down the man, to make Claire face what she'd done. But doubt crept in. The cops had been skeptical, their report thin without evidence. Claire's denial was airtight, her charm a shield I'd never broken through. Mom would side with her, Dad would stay out of it, and I'd be the family pariah, the one who overreacted. Yet the bruises on my arm, the pain in my ribs, were real. The fear in Ethan's eyes, Lily's screams, they were real. I couldn't let this go, not entirely. I stood, my legs unsteady, and started cleaning, picking up crayons, folding blankets, trying to reclaim my space. Each movement hurt, but it was something I could control. Claire had walked away, but I wouldn't let her rewrite this story. I'd find a way to hold her accountable, for the kids, for me. Even if it meant facing the guilt, the doubt, and the family fallout alone. The silence in my apartment after Claire's departure was suffocating, the absence of Ethan and Lily's small voices amplifying the chaos left behind. My living room was a wreck, crayon scribbles on the coffee table, muddy boot prints from the stranger's intrusion, and the broken door chain dangling like a taunt. My ribs ached with every breath, my arm a canvas of purple bruises where the man had grabbed me. I was 28, single, and reeling, the memory of Claire's smirk and her gaslighting words, "You forced my hand," burning in my mind. She'd swept in, taken her kids, and left me to pick up the pieces of an assault I was sure she'd orchestrated. My hands shook as I sat at my kitchen table, the police officer's card beside my phone, its edges already creased from my indecision. I couldn't let this go, but I needed someone to back me up, to tell me I wasn't crazy. So I called my parents again, hoping this time they'd see Claire for what she was. I started with Mom, her number a reflex despite the dread pooling in my gut. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright with that forced cheer she used to smooth over family drama. "Sarah, honey, how's it going?" she asked, like we were chatting about the weather. I took a deep breath, the pain in my ribs sharpening, and told her everything. The assault, the stranger's threat, Claire's sudden return and her claim that I'd brought it on myself. My voice cracked as I described the kids' fear, Ethan's quiet bravery, Lily's screams. Mom listened, her silence punctuated by small, uncomfortable hums. When I finished, I waited for outrage, for her to finally take my side. Instead, she sighed. "Sarah, you know Claire's impulsive. But sending someone to hurt you, that's a stretch. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Can't you let it go? For the kids' sake, for family." Her words were a punch, softer than the stranger's but just as painful. "Let it go," I repeated, my voice rising. "Mom, I have bruises. He broke into my home. The kids saw it." She clucked her tongue, that old sound of disapproval I'd heard since childhood. "I'm not saying it's okay, honey, but you did threaten to call the police." That probably upset her. Claire's sensitive. Let's not make this a bigger mess. Sensitive. The word was absurd, a shield Mom had always held up for Claire. I remembered being 12, watching Claire borrow Mom's car without permission, crashing it into a mailbox, and walking away with a hug while I got lectured for not supporting her. I ended the call abruptly, my throat tight, promising to think it over just to escape her voice. Dad was next, though I knew he'd be no better. He answered with a grunt, the TV blaring in the background as usual. I recounted the assault, my voice steadier this time, but his response was predictable. "Claire's out of control," he said, his tone flat. "Always has been. You should cut her off, Sarah. Save yourself the headache." I pressed him, asking if he'd talk to her, maybe take the kids if she pulled this again. He hesitated, then muttered, "I'm too old for that. Your mom and I can't handle kids. Just, keep your distance." He hung up, leaving me with nothing but his usual detachment. Mom enabled Claire. Dad checked out. I was alone, as always, cleaning up the mess. Desperate for clarity, I called Jess, my best friend, who'd been my sounding board since college. She answered immediately, her voice sharp with concern. "Sarah, oh my God, are you okay?" I spilled the story again, my ribs throbbing as I paced my tiny kitchen. Jess was furious, her words spilling out in a rush. "Claire sent that guy, I know it. You need to press charges, Sarah. She can't get away with this." I hesitated, my fingers brushing the bruises on my arm. "But the kids, what if this makes it worse for them? Claire's their mom." Jess softened but stayed firm. "You're not the bad guy here. She put them in danger too. Call the police, file a report. You've got evidence, right?" I glanced at my phone, the threatening text still there, the boot prints on my floor, the pain in my side. She was right, but the idea of escalating, dragging Claire into a legal mess, risking the kid's stability, made my stomach churn. I needed to document everything before I lost my nerve. I grabbed my phone, snapping photos of my bruises, the purple marks stark against my pale skin. I photographed the boot prints, the broken door chain, even the Cran Street coffee table, a reminder of the kid's presence. I saved Claire's texts, the threatening one from the unknown number, and wrote down every detail I could remember about the man. His jacket, his cigarette smell, his cold eyes. It wasn't much, but it was something. I emailed the photos to myself, a backup in case my phone died or I chickened out. The act felt defiant, a small rebellion against Claire's manipulation and my parents' dismissal, but it also felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Needing a break from my spiraling thoughts, I drove to a walk-in clinic, the pain in my ribs too persistent to ignore. The waiting room was sterile, buzzing with fluorescent lights and the low hum of other patients' conversations. The doctor, a tired woman with kind eyes, examined my bruises and ordered an X-ray. "No fractures," she said, prescribing ice and rest. "But you should report this. Bruising like that isn't accidental." I nodded, mumbling about the police visit, but her words stuck with me. Not accidental. Claire's actions, or her friends, had left marks, physical and otherwise. I left with a pamphlet on trauma resources, my mind drifting to Ethan and Lily. Were they okay? Claire had taken them, but to what? Her chaotic life, her sketchy friends. The thought of them in danger twisted my gut. Back home, I called my parents again, this time in a group chat, hoping together they'd take me seriously. It was a mistake. Mom dominated, her voice sharp. Sarah, you're blowing this out of proportion. Claire's back with the kids now, so let's move on. You don't need to drag the police into it. Dad chimed in, half-hearted. Yeah, just drop it. Claire's trouble, but she's their mom. I snapped, my patience gone. She sent someone to attack me. You're okay with that? Mom's voice softened, but not in a good way. Honey, you're upset, I get it. But family doesn't turn on family. Think about Ethan and Lily. I hung up, my hands shaking. They'd made it clear, I was the problem, the one disrupting family harmony. I'd spent my life avoiding that label, troublemaker, selfish, but now it loomed, threatening to isolate me. I sank onto the couch, the apartment too quiet without the kids. I missed their noise, their mess, even as I resented Claire for forcing them on me. A memory surfaced. Claire at 15, sneaking out to a party, leaving me to cover for her when Mom noticed her empty bed. I'd lied, taken the blame, and gotten grounded for a week while Claire waltzed back unscathed. She'd thanked me with a wink, like it was a game. Now, at 32, she was still playing, and I was still paying the price. But this time, the stakes were higher, bruises, fear, the kid's safety. I couldn't let her win again. Jess texted, checking in, her words a lifeline. You're not alone. Do what's right for you. I clung to that, staring at my photos, my evidence. I wasn't ready to call the police again, not yet. But I wouldn't let Claire erase this. I'd document every detail, build my case, and decide my next step. For me, for Ethan and Lily, I'd find a way to hold her accountable, even if it meant standing alone against my family's denial. The apartment felt empty, but my resolve was growing, a small spark in the wreckage Claire had left behind. The apartment was too quiet, the absence of Ethan and Lily's chatter a void that echoed the turmoil in my head. It was late Tuesday evening, 4 days since Claire dumped her kids on me and 3 since the stranger's fists left bruises on my arm and ribs. My living room bore the scars of the chaos, crayon marks, muddy boot prints, a broken door chain, but it was the ache in my chest that hurt most. Claire's gaslighting, my parents' dismissal, and the kids' frightened faces haunted me. I was 28, single, and lost, my orderly life appended by a sister who'd always skated by on charm and excuses. I couldn't sleep, my mind a tangle of anger, guilt, and fear. So I did the only thing that felt grounding. I grabbed a notebook, sat at my cluttered kitchen table, and started writing. The pen scratched against the paper, my handwriting shaky as I poured out the story. I wrote about Claire's unannounced drop-off, her breezy demand that I watch Ethan and Lily for 8 weeks while she jetted to Bali. I described my panic, my ultimatum, pick them up or I'd call the police, and her mocking silence. The threatening text from an unknown number, the stranger's assault, the terror in the kid's eyes as I crumpled against the wall, it all spilled out, raw and unfiltered. I wrote about Claire's return, her smug deflection, blaming me for forcing her hand. My parents' reactions, Mom's plea to let it go, Dad's suggestion to cut contact, felt like betrayal. I paused, my ribs throbbing, and wrote the question burning in me. Was I wrong to threaten the police? Should I pursue charges, even if it tears the family apart? The words filled pages, my hand cramping, the apartment dark except for the glow of my desk lamp. The notebook was a lifeline, a place to untangle the mess Claire had made of my life. I admitted things I hadn't said aloud. I felt guilty for not wanting the kids, for snapping at Lily, for failing to shield them from the violence. But I was furious, too, at Claire for her recklessness, at myself for letting her manipulate me again. Writing it down didn't solve anything, but it clarified the stakes. I couldn't let Claire erase this, not with my bruises still fresh, not with Ethan's quiet "Are you okay?" echoing in my mind. I closed the notebook, my resolve flickering but growing. Needing more than my own thoughts, I called Jess, my best friend, who'd been my rock through this nightmare. It was past 10 p.m., but she answered, her voice warm with concern. Sarah, you sound awful. What's going on? I sat on the couch, the blanket Ethan had used still folded there, and told her about my journal, my doubts, my fear of escalating things with Claire. Jess listened, her silence patient, then spoke with the fierce clarity I needed. You're not wrong, Sarah. Claire put you and the kids in danger. That guy who attacked you. That's not a misunderstanding, that's a crime. You need to report it, for your sake and the kids. Her words were balm, validating my anger, but I hesitated. What if it hurts Ethan and Lily? Claire's their mom. If CPS gets involved, Jess softened but stayed firm. You're not the one hurting them, Claire is. Protecting yourself doesn't make you the bad guy. Her support steadied me, but I needed more perspective, someone outside my circle. The clinic's trauma pamphlet had listed a counseling hotline, and on impulse, I called the next morning, scheduling a session with a therapist named Dr. Ellis. Her office was small, cluttered with books and a worn armchair that felt oddly comforting. I brought my notebook, its pages a map of my turmoil, and recounted the story again. The drop-off, the assault, Claire's manipulation. Dr. Ellis listened, her grey eyes calm but probing. You're carrying a lot of guilt, she said, her voice measured. Why do you think you're responsible for Claire's choices? The question hit hard, unearthing memories of childhood, always cleaning up Claire's messes while Mom praised her spirit. I admitted my fear of being the family outcast, the one who ruined everything by pursuing charges. Dr. Ellis didn't judge, but she challenged me. You threatened legal action to set a boundary, but it escalated. That doesn't mean you caused the assault. Claire's response was her choice. What do you want now? Justice or peace? Her neutrality forced me to think. Justice meant confronting Claire, maybe the police, risking family fallout and the kid's stability. Peace meant letting it go, but that felt like surrender, letting Claire win again. I left the session with no clear answer, but her words lingered, a mirror to my indecision. That night, I sat on my couch, the apartment still a mess, its disarray a reflection of my fractured thoughts. I reread my journal, the pages heavy with pain but also truth. Jess's fierce support echoed in my mind, urging action, while Dr. Ellis's questions prodded deeper, exposing my fear of standing alone. I thought of Ethan and Lily, their small hands in mine, their trust despite the chaos. Claire had endangered them, left them with me, then sent a thug to silence me. My bruises, my broken door, were proof of her reach. I couldn't undo the past, but I could choose what came next. I opened my laptop, pulling up the photos I'd taken. My bruises, the boot prints, the texts. Jess was right, this was a crime, not a family spat. Dr. Ellis's question, justice or peace, tipped the scale. Peace wasn't possible if Claire faced no consequences. I wasn't ready to call the police yet, but I was close, the idea solidifying like a stone in my chest. I wrote one more journal entry, short but firm, I'm not the bad guy. Claire did this. I'll make sure she answers for it. The words felt like a vow, a step toward reclaiming my life from the wreckage Claire had left behind. The morning sun barely pierced the gloom of my apartment, its curtains still drawn against the world outside. It was Wednesday, 5 days since Claire had dumped Ethan and Lily on me, for since the stranger's fists left bruises on my arm and ribs, and one since I'd poured my heart into my notebook and found clarity in Jess's support and Dr. Ellis's probing questions. My living room was a shrine to the chaos, crayon marks, muddy boot prints, a broken door chain, but I was done feeling like a victim. I was 28, single, and tired of Claire's manipulations running my life. My ribs still ached, a dull reminder of the assault, but the pain fueled my resolve. I couldn't let Claire walk away from this, not after endangering her kids and me. Sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by photos of my bruises and the threatening text from an unknown number, I decided it was time to act. I'd file a police report and contact Child Protective Services to ensure Ethan and Lily's safety, no matter the cost to my family's fragile harmony. I started with the police, my hands trembling as I dialed the non-emergency line. The officer who'd visited after the assault had left a card, and I clutched it like a lifeline, reciting the case number to the dispatcher. An hour later, I was at the station, a grey building that smelled of coffee and paperwork. The officer from before, the woman with the tight bun, met me in a small interview room. Her name was Officer Reyes, and her skepticism hadn't softened. "You're adding to the report?" she asked, her pen poised over a form. I nodded, laying out my evidence. Photos of my bruises, the boot prints, the broken chain, and screenshots of Claire's texts and the threatening one. I told her about Claire's sudden return, her gaslighting, her claim that I'd forced her hand. "I think she sent that guy," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "He told me to stay out of it after I threatened to report her for abandoning her kids." Reyes's eyebrow lifted, but she took notes, her pen scratching steadily. "No ID on the suspect, though?" she asked, her tone neutral. I shook my head, frustration bubbling up. He was in and out fast. "But it's too convenient. Claire ignores me for days, I get that text, then this." She nodded, non-committal, and asked for Claire's contact information and a description of her car. I gave what I could, but the lack of concrete proof, a name, a face, made my story feel flimsy, even to me. "We'll look into it," Reyes said, handing me a revised report number. "But without a clear suspect, it's tough. Keep us posted if anything else happens." I left the station, my stomach knotted, the weight of her words settling in. Justice wasn't guaranteed, but I'd started the process, a step I couldn't take back. Next was Child Protective Services, a call I'd dreaded more than the police. I sat on my couch, the same spot where Ethan and Lily had slept, their absence a hollow ache. The CPS hotline connected me to a caseworker named Ms. Carter, whose voice was calm but clipped, like she'd heard 1,000 stories like mine. I explained Claire's abandonment, the assault, and my fear for the kids' safety, my voice cracking as I described Ethan's quiet bravery and Lily's clingy trust. "Their mom's unstable," I said, hating how harsh it sounded. "She left them with me for days, no plan, and I don't know if they're safe now." Ms. Carter asked for details, Claire's address, the kids' ages, any history of neglect. I gave what I knew, my guilt rising with every word. Was I betraying them? Or protecting them? She promised a welfare check on Ethan and Lily, warning it could take days. "We'll follow up," she said, and I hung up, my hands cold, the reality of involving CPS sinking in. Back home, I called Jess, needing her fire to keep me grounded. "You did the right thing," she said, her voice fierce. "Claire can't keep pulling this crap. The kids deserve better, and you deserve to feel safe." I nodded, though she couldn't see me, her words a lifeline against my doubt. But then my phone buzzed, a text from Claire, as if she'd sensed my moves. "You're making a mistake," it read, short and cold. My heart lurched. Had someone tipped her off? The police? Mom? The message felt like a warning, an echo of the stranger's threat. I didn't respond, but I saved it, adding it to my growing file of evidence. My apartment, still a mess, felt less like a home and more like a battlefield, each mark a reminder of what I was fighting for. I visited the clinic again, the pain in my ribs lingering. The same doctor examined me, noting the bruises were fading but still visible. "You're healing," she said, her tone kind. "But trauma sticks around. Talk to someone." I mentioned Dr. Ellis, and she nodded, handing me another pamphlet on support groups. Driving home, I thought of Claire's childhood stunts, stealing Mom's jewelry at 14, blaming me, skating free while I got grounded. She'd always been untouchable, her charm a shield. Not this time. I'd reported her, started a paper trail, and though the police and CPS might not act fast, I'd lit a spark. Claire's text, her silence, her thug, they were proof I wasn't wrong. But as I parked outside my apartment, the kids' faces, Ethan's frown, Lily's bunny, haunted me. I'd acted for them, for me, but the fear of what came next lingered, sharp as the pain in my side. The days blurred into a week, then two, the weight of my actions settling over my apartment like dust. It was mid-June, and my life felt suspended, caught between the chaos Claire had unleashed and the slow grind of consequences I'd set in motion. My bruises had faded to yellow, my ribs ached only when I moved wrong, but the emotional scars were raw. I was 28, single, and rebuilding, my apartment slowly returning to order, crayons gone, bootprint scrubbed, a new door chain installed. Yet the silence from Ethan and Lily's absence was louder than any mess. I'd filed a police report and contacted CPS, steps that felt both right and terrifying. Claire's last text, "You're making a mistake," hung over me, a shadow I couldn't shake. But I wasn't alone anymore. Jess's support and Dr. Ellis's clarity had anchored me, and I was determined to see this through, for myself and the kids. The police called first, a week after my report. Officer Reyes's voice was brisk but not unkind. They'd questioned Claire, who denied everything, claiming I'd exaggerated the assault and fabricated her involvement. No surprise there, her charm was her weapon. They'd found no trace of the man, no security footage, no witnesses beyond Mrs. Delgado, who'd only heard noise. Without more, they couldn't charge anyone, but the case stayed open. "Keep us updated," Reyes said, and I promised I would, though my hope for justice dimmed. CPS was slower, but Ms. Carter called 10 days later. They'd visited Claire's home, found the kids safe but stressed. Claire was cooperative, playing the frazzled single mom, but they'd opened a file, monitoring her. "We'll check in monthly," Ms. Carter said. It wasn't much, but it was something, a safety net for Ethan and Lily. Claire cut contact, her number now blocked, her silence a wall. Mom called once, her voice tight with accusation. "You've upset everyone, Sarah." Claire's devastated. I hung up, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. Dad sent a text, "You did what you had to." It was the closest he'd come to support, but it was enough. Jess came over, bringing wine and her fierce loyalty. "You're stronger than you know," she said, and I clung to that, sipping wine on my cleaned-up couch, the apartment feeling like mine again. Dr. Ellis, in our next session, pushed me to reflect. "You set a boundary," she said. "That's power, even if it's messy." Her words sank in, reshaping how I saw myself, not the family fixer, but someone who could stand up. I journaled again, late at night, the notebook now a chronicle of my fight. I wrote about the kids, hoping they'd forgive me someday, hoping they were okay. I wrote about Claire, her betrayal, but also my refusal to let her define me. I'd lost my family's approval, maybe forever, but I'd gained something else, certainty. I wasn't wrong to threaten the police, to report the assault, to protect the kids. Claire's actions had consequences, and I'd made sure they followed her. The future was uncertain. Court dates, family rifts, the kids' fate, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I closed the notebook, my apartment quiet, the new door chain gleaming. I'd faced Claire's chaos and come out stronger, ready for whatever came next, a vow to myself and to Ethan and Lily that I'd never be silenced again.